Today, a couple tips for both Krita and Blender. Um, as you guys can see, made quite a bit of progress in the last few weeks. The entire final sequence of the show is complete. It's still got to be rendered out and edited, but this is the scene break, and now I'm actually working backwards again from here. So, kind of interesting as I'm scanning through the drawings. I was looking at this shot, and I see this is actually again the same pose, but I found it interesting that down here there's, where the heck is it? Right here. That's virtually the same pose. Whoops, sorry about that. I can flip that and just change his eyes, and that'll give me 1, 2 shots right there. So anyway, the tips today are, I've even made a list. You can't really see it, but especially because the screen is reversed. I put the webcam. The webcam makes me look like a lefty. It's flipped only because the software I use tends to, the lower right hand corner seems to be the least important part of the screen for most of the software I use. Okay, so question. Let's actually use this one as a demonstration. So the question is how to get the look of scanned art, which it's just a conceit. I guess it's actually already open here, isn't it? Just a conceit on my part to, I like the looks of anime that are, you know, that use traditional drawing on paper that's been scanned. I like that look, and how to get it. Well, I've kind of been getting it, and the key seems to be a couple things. Number one, and I'm going to check things off my list as I say them so I don't get confused about what I've covered. Number one, the main pencil, I guess you would have to say, that I use in Krita is this one. So this is C pencil -2. It's right there in the, I'm sure it's somewhere here in the sketch category. I've got it in my faves and also in the Dave category. Well, I changed the default width of this was 4 pixels, and I changed it to 6 for just various reasons as I went through different experiments. And by the way, I'm kind of breaking my rule here. I probably shouldn't use this shot because truth of the matter is I already determined that I don't need to redraw this shot. So let's pick a different one, and then I'll show you how I've been getting this look. Okay, we'll use this shot of Asher. So we open that in a new document. Okay, so here's the way I've been doing it. I'll use this sketch as a guide, and but it's interesting because I've been kind of putting everything in a single layer. The mindset behind what I'm going to describe here, let me just lower the volume on, whoops, lower the volume on this. And the mindset is that I really want to keep a very fluid process that is uninterrupted, right? I want to go as quickly as I can from pencils to inks. Actually, I made his ears a little bit too big, by the way, in the storyboard. So I'm going to just sketch this out, and it doesn't really matter how hard I press. Now, I draw the best, it seems, when I use a lot of straight lines, not a lot of curves. Actually, I seem to find my way better when I really favor straight lines. Some nice big. Okay, so let's get this in here as a sketch, and I'll show you what the 2 steps are. Basically, the step 1 is I'm assuming that this is going to just be a pencil test here. I'm not concerned about keeping this too clean, and I'll show you why here in a second. What I've been finding myself doing is go ahead and sketch it out really, really loosely. Okay. And then I'm basically using the curves tool twice in this manner. Number one, you hit Control M, and I've got a preset called turn down. And what turn down does is it takes the alpha channel and lowers it to like 25%. Okay, and the only reason I do that is to make the sketch really, really, really light but still visible so that I can trace it. And then I still want to keep it loose and a little bit sketchy like this. Okay. Now, as I say, I like this technique because it's very conducive to moving quickly and just like I said, going directly from pencil test to ink if we can. It's not always possible, but what I'm finding is it usually is. Okay, so let me get the basic lines in here for Asher. And then I'll show you what the next step is. So the turn down, again, I'm going to redo that. I want that to be a little more angular. Again, is to use the curves tool, and you're operating on the alpha. You're not operating on any of the color channels. And I've tried it different ways, using a red pencil and then trying to take the red out, that sort of thing. What I'm doing here seems to by far work the best, just to operate on the alpha channel. Whoops, missed. Okay, that wasn't supposed to happen. Okay. So I love the loose, fluid feel of this. Let me pull out a little bit. Okay. And then, can I get it? I did okay. Okay, so now step 2, actually he's got to have some wrinklage going on. Okay, step 2, and you can do this as a filter mask. So you can apply it to an entire animated layer, and I have, and it works quite well. It's instant cleanup. Instant cleanup, that's what we want. And here's how you do it. Control M, but instead of doing the turn down thing, I do clean up. And what clean up does, again, it operates on the alpha channel, but what it does is you're pulling out of the bottom of it like this. Now let me turn the sketch off so you can see what we're actually getting here. Look at that. I better hit Z. Okay, I didn't mean to do that, sorry. I guess the undo doesn't undo turning off a layer. Okay, so I want to turn this layer off now so you can see clearly what we have here. I want to show you the amount of garbage that we may have in the shot, because this is really what I'm trying to do. Is I'm trying to be able to really just sketch stuff in, keep it super loose, but still be able to clean it up nicely. So again, I'm going to hit Control M. It already grabbed the correct preset, clean up. But again, it's nothing more than taking the alpha channel and going like this. And the thing is, depending on how you drew it, you can really dial it in. Like, maybe I only want to go this far, and if I go ahead and apply it as a filter mask, number one, I can change it later. If I decide that it was a little too aggressive or not aggressive enough, or maybe I want to, dial it in a little bit better, maybe make the lines actually more dense, but even yet take out more of the sketch lines. By doing it as a filter mask, I can then actually go into the drawing and fix the things that aren't quite right. Okay, so right now, this layer is having the cleanup applied to it in real time because it's a filter mask. And, for some stuff, you probably just want to go ahead and do some erasing to keep things clean. But this variance in the lines, I really like the look of that. I actually like it a lot. I guess I don't want to use the eraser. I want to use the eraser brush. So works quite nicely, and you can turn it off anytime like that. Okay, and so what I've found is using this technique has been conducive to you know, making the paint operations actually work pretty well. Of course, it's an ongoing quest to be meticulous about getting rid of erroneous lines, and especially not having leaks. So you know, you want to scan around and look for places where you're going to have a hole in the art that is going to cause a problem when you try to fill it with color. Okay, so that covers how to get the scanned pencil drawing look. And if you look at it, if you compare it to any anime you might have seen, you can tell that's definitely got that sort of scanned art look. It's a little rougher than a proper nice you know, ink job. So that covers that. Now, still here in Krita, one question I had was how can I, like, for example, let's say that I wanted to isolate his eyes. So I don't want to get too far into my work before I start thinking about separating things out. So let's say the only thing, or let's use his mouth as an example instead. Okay, so let's do this. Let's put in 2 keys just to kind of give the idea here. So I'm just going to add a second key, and all I'm going to do is erase his mouth. Okay, and we'll turn on onion skins just for a minute so we can kind of see what we're doing. Okay, so that's fine. And maybe I would have a faint line there that would be to indicate his tongue. Okay, so the question becomes, how do I go ahead and chop the guy into pieces if I've already done some animation? Now, this comes up actually kind of a lot. Okay, so in other words, if I realize, look, his mouth's being animated separately, and maybe I've already colored this, maybe I've painted it and everything, and then I realize, boy, this is crazy, because what happens is if I have a bunch of lip sync action going on, and then I realize that, let's say, I want to make a change here on his head. I don't like the way his head's a little too bulbous here. So I grab the liquify tool. I'm like, oh, that's easy. I can just make a quick change like this. Okay, fine. But the problem is that, okay, so to be fair, this should be here. I was on the wrong frame when I did it. But the problem now is that his entire head is baked into all those animation keys, as you can see. That's not really what I wanted. What I wanted was to change his head and have that change propagate all the way through the animation. And I've kind of screwed that up because I have his mouth baked in, if you will, baked into his head. And so there's no way you're going to fix his head twice in a row, let alone 5 or 6 or 10 times, and have it be the same way every time. That's not going to happen. So you have to have a way to separate the layers out from each other, even after they've been animated. Okay? Well, here's what you want to do. Number one, if you had not yet animated it, then of course all you really need to do is just grab the free selection tool. Let's see what they call it. They call it the outline selection tool. I've got it mapped to the S key because that's the same key that the selection tool in OpenTunes uses. Okay, so you just go Control X, Control V, and now he's got his mouth in a separate layer. The problem is that you just get the first mouth shape. You haven't cut and pasted the animation, and likewise, you can see that for him, the second mouth shape comes back. So that's a little problematic. So let's go back here a couple steps and layer these two back together. So what do? Well, here's what I do. What I would do is, number one, I would simply duplicate the layer. Okay? Number 2, I would take out all the additional keys from this layer because the only thing that changed was his mouth, and so I just want this static drawing of his head to propagate through the whole animation. Okay, so that takes care of that. But now what do you do with this layer? Well, what you do is you hit Control G and you put it in a group and then just add another layer on top of it and then go like this. And I'm going to hit Control Shift A to undo the selection. If you're using the latest version of Krita, probably the hotkey to undo the selection is actually the escape key. But it might not be because they've changed it twice. In 4.1.7, it's Control Shift A. In I don't even know what the next version was. It was escape. And in the latest version, I think they changed it again, actually. Crazy stuff. So what do? You go in this new layer that you just added, you just hit, you go ahead and draw a line around his mouth. Okay? So now I'm just going to make sure. Did I fold this up? I think I folded it up because, hang on, let me check everything. Let me turn everything off and back on. I hate that when I'm trying to demonstrate something and I actually make a mistake. I did. Sure as heck. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to go ahead and add a second key, go back here, and remedy this immediately by hitting erase, boom, 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 boom. Okay, sorry about that, guys. So now we have our 2 keys again. Okay, so with that, I'm going to delete all these and start over. Okay, just for demonstration purposes. Okay, so we've got this layer that's got animation baked into it. And of course, this is no longer a legitimate example because his head is already fixed. Okay, can you give me that? All right. So what we're going to do is duplicate the layer again, and then in this layer, because we don't need the mouth keys, we'll just get rid of those keys, and in fact, I will also just erase his mouth from here completely. So his mouth is completely gone from this layer. So now we have this layer. And now again, I'm going to go back and recap what to do. I just turned off, by the way, that cleanup plugin because that's just confusing things. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm just checking the shape of his mouth. Okay. What I'm going to do is, again, and it can be any color. It would actually be better to use a bombastic color like red so it's easy to see. So I'm just going to make a circle around his mouth. Okay? And then I'm going to hit the tilde key, which, at least for me, isolates this. You know what, guys? I'm making nothing but mistakes here. Back up. Step 1. Put the layer in a group. Add a new layer. Then on that layer, draw the circle around the mouth. Holy cow, am I making a lot of mistakes. Okay, now I hit the tilde key to isolate that layer, and I hit the F key to fill, and I fill that entire layer. Okay? And now I put this layer in erase mode. Okay? Now we turn this layer on, and we have exactly what we wanted. And in this layer, we can go ahead and add as many mouth shape keys as we want. And when we're done, we just grab the group and hit Control E to flatten the layer. And you end up with this layer that has just the lip sync in it. Obviously, the idea of adding more keys is kind of silly because the whole point was, what if you had 24 keys? You know, if you got 24 keys that are baked into his head, but now you find out you've got to fix his head, you need to get the stuff that's animated out of there. So that's how you do it. Just duplicate the layer, put it in a group, add a second layer, draw a circle around it, fill it in, put it in erase mode, and now you've erased everything except the stuff you want to keep in the new layer you created. Got it? Simple. So frankly, I'm moving a little too fast, and that's why I'm kind of making some mistakes, but I'm sure you guys will forgive me. Okay, so that's it for Krita tips. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're actually going to, I'm going to go back here and I think, yeah, we're going to go ahead and save that. Let me look at my .672. Is that what that was? Yeah, 672.ping already exists. And I do want to also save it as a Krita file. Okay. And by the way, actually, to be fair, I really need to adhere to my convention, which is to add another layer and and label it. So this is minus 672.ping.cra. Now when I save that, it's saved as a ping, which means in my storyboard it now has the notation, so I know what the Krita file is, but usually they're named the same, obviously. And we also have the Krita file ready to go when I'm ready to go ahead and finish up this shot. Okay, so now enough of Krita. Let's jump over to Blender. Two things that I was going to cover regarding Blender. So I'm going to pull up two different shots, and the point I'm kind of covering here is how to use Blender to add secondary animation. If you're into OpenTunes, this would be the kind of thing you would do with the plastic tool. The gospel truth is that doing it the way I'm about to show you, Blender gives you much, did I say much? It gives you much better control over the deformation of the art. It just is what it is, and so I've actually been favoring Blender for this stuff. So, and there's basically two ways to do it. One is with bones and one is with shape keys. So in this shot, what we see is we see Tianara and a background. Okay? Now, Tianara is in fact imported as a mesh, and the way I did that, just for completeness, I will show, is you go Mesh, Import Images as Planes, you select all the images in the image sequence, you tell the loader to recognize this as an image sequence, and to put it in emit mode. That allows you to use lights later. Okay? Now I'm just going to double check here and see if I actually did that. With this one, I think I did. Yes. In fact, by having emit mode, you can tweak the brightness of the character and do some rudimentary color correction. If you need to do more advanced color correction, you'll see in the next example how to do that. You just do it with lights. It's pretty easy, actually. And the more you turn the emit value of the character down, the more you see the effect of any lights that you shine on them. Okay? So that can be just for illumination, where you see an effect like you see in shows like Korra, newer like American anime type shows, where whenever you see a close-up, it's not a flat color. It's always a little bit of a gradient. It's got some little bit of movement to the color. So I guess I could demonstrate real quick how you would do that. I need to turn off down here. Where are we at here? View, display, only render. Okay. So this shot, yeah, it looks like we don't have any lights in there. So I'm just going to add one. So let's just add a lamp, point light. Okay. And now in front view, I'm just going to move it around like this. And if you look close, you can see it's pretty close to her. And I'm going to move it back like this in 3D space, so that now you see that you can turn this up and down. And if you make it really close, then you can actually enforce kind of a gradient on the character. So if I actually crank that up a little bit, but then take her material and turn the emit level down, then you see how you can really get a crazy gradient going on if that's what you want to do. Okay, so now, bearing in mind, let's put this back in only render mode. So basically you had this animation, and so most of this action in lip sync is baked into the image sequence. It was done in Krita. However, this initial head turn that way, I wanted to add, and after she said her line, I wanted to turn her head that way. So this head turn there is not in the original image sequence, and this head turn there is not either. So what I did was, again, just for completeness, after I imported the image sequence, this was not all subdivided like this. Okay? In my case, what I did as far as subdividing goes is I took the mesh and I just added a modifier of subdivision surface. Okay? And the subdivision surface is added in simple mode, and right now I'm not sure what's going on here because it's okay, yeah, we don't want that to be 6. Okay, let me see here. I'm a little confused on why. I'm confused on why I'm not seeing the change by adding the subdivision surface in the real-time display, because it's because I'm in edit mode. There it is. Sorry, my bad. I was just assuming I was actually in object mode. So anyway, if you add a subdivision surface in simple mode, it just subdivides it. It doesn't smooth it out. Like Catmull Clark is going to actually smooth it out, which, you know, you don't really want in this case. So you add the subdivision surface, and then you just subdivide it as many times as you want. In this case, it was already subdivided, obviously, before, and there's no need to do it again. So I'm just going to delete that. But once you add the subdivision surface, you can get it to the level of resolution you want, and then click the apply button, and that bakes the subdivisions into the mesh, and your plane that's playing the video is now has a lot of resolution for the step we're going to follow next. Okay, so what I did was I then just simply created an armature, and I kind of did it the you know, kind of the OpenToonz way. What I did was I went to the frame where she was in the pose that I knew I was going to want to manipulate. So I didn't want to set up the bones here. I wanted to wait until she was over here, because I knew I wanted the arm that was out to be covered by the bones, just in case. I wasn't sure, but I was thinking maybe I was going to use that for something, you know, perhaps. So how do you do that? Well, what you do is you simply go add armature, and you add a simple bone, okay, and then you hit tab to go into edit mode, and then you just hit the E key to extrude it, and then from any of these points you can just keep hitting the E key and you extrude it however you want to. Okay? Now, the actual steps, I'm not going to follow through. I'm going to show how to do them, but not actually do them because I don't want to booger up my scene. But what you would do is you would go ahead and grab your character, and then you would hit Shift and grab the bones and hit Control P. What I did after I added all these bones was I actually just added the rig with automatic weights. And what I've been finding lately is most of the time, it's just like doing Plastic Tool and OpenToonz. If you add enough bones and you're just kind of sensible about it, Blender does a great job. So I'm going to make sure auto keying is turned off. And so you've got this animated sequence that's playing, and all I had to do is go, what is it, Control Tab? Yeah, hit Control Tab to go into pose mode, and now I can just rotate this, and actually this is the bone I did the animation on. Okay, I'll zoom in so it's easier to see. right? So you got quite a lot of latitude. It isn't perfect. You can only bend it so far before things start falling apart. I don't even know how this would work. Let's just see. Yeah, I mean, you could have done something with that, and even this, you know. But again, if you wanted to really have control, you would want to be setting up vertex groups and things like that. And I rarely need to do that, because the reason I use this technique is just for simple secondary animation that just adds a little bit. So in this case, what it was let's look at the dope sheet here. Got to go down here. Yeah, I'm looking at the camera. I'm not looking at the. Here we go. So if I hit Control Up arrow, you can see these are the keys. And I actually, one thing probably worth mentioning for sure is I'm moving the bones, and I'm not generally having auto keying turned on, because then it sets keys for everything, and you wind up with 800 billion data points that are keyframed that you really didn't want. I just want to keyframe just what I want to keyframe. So what I do is, go to the frame where I'm going to make my little change, whatever it's going to be, and then I'm going to shift things around, and then I'm going to hit the I key, and I'm going to only key on rotation. So the only thing that got keyed was rotation, and only on this one bone. Okay? So the other thing to be aware of with that is this. If you're going for that anime look, then you probably don't want full interpolation. Like the default interpolation is going to slowly move the bone from this position to that position over however many frames it takes. That's not what I wanted. What I wanted to do was I wanted to hit the T key and change the interpolation to constant. And that makes it so that the bone changes, it just jumps immediately. When it hits the key, it just jumps to the other position. So you can basically, by looking at the bone that's highlighted blue, you can see exactly what I did. And that's actually because I'm using constant interpolation. That's specifically why this particular motion is broken into 2 keys, because I wanted to go ahead and get the final position figured out, and then go back 3 keys, set an intermediate pose, and then again, by hitting the T key over the dope sheet, you can change whatever keys are selected to whatever interpolation you want. Now, I'll show you right now. If I change this to typical default Bezier interpolation, then here's what happens. You see? Everything's smooth. And that certainly has its point. If we jump into only render mode, it's an attractive look, but it's not appropriate to what I'm doing. See? It's just not appropriate to this type of a cartoon, because all of the action, all the animation is on 3s, and so I really don't want to add secondary animation that's on 1s. It just looks cheeseball. There's other ways you could deal with that. You could actually be animating at 8 frames per second in Blender, and then but then it creates more headaches downstream when you go to edit the thing. So anyway, that's how you would do it with bones. Well, what if you wanted to use shape keys to accomplish the same thing? Well, that's what I did here. Now in this case, with Asher, we actually have a scenario where I did the thing I described earlier, where I actually have a yellow light, well, I should say orange, it's really orange, and a blue light, because as you can see, he's kind of lit from under. It's a scary situation. This is getting towards the end of the sequence, and in fact, after all this action, it fades to black. So this is actually shot number 1, is just him turning around, and then it's going to cut to another drawing that I'm going to do of the door, and you hear pounding on the door, and then it's going to cut to this shot here where he says no, and then you see his eyes go into sort of a scowl. Now, I broke my own rule here, to be fair, by going ahead and allowing the animation of his scowl to be on just on 1s with linear interpolation. I just made a judgment call in this case. But if we grab a hold of this, you can see I did the same thing. I added a subdivision surface, and then after I had applied the subdivision surface, I actually just went ahead and kind of went like this and started deleting erroneous or extra vertices just to get them out of there. There's still probably more than there necessarily needs to be, but so now the question is, well, how do you do secondary animation using shape keys? I've done it in the past on here using the Animal plugin, but the truth of the matter is that using shape keys does give you kind of a lot more control, actually, over what you're doing. The key to shape keys, I'm going to go ahead and delete these shape keys so that now we've lost our secondary animation. Okay? So you still have the animation from the image sequence that was done in Krita, but you don't have the secondary animation with the scowl and all that. So let's go ahead and recreate it from scratch. The process with shape keys, it's not intuitive. So I'm going to explain it so that it's very intuitive. Number one, decide in advance how many shape keys you want. You can always add more later, but in order to kind of understand what's going on, it's probably best to just decide, I know I'm going to do a scowl, and I know I'm going to do something, let's say, with his mouth. So I'm going to add 3 shape keys. One for the basis, in other words, this is the key that's going to not be modified at all, and then I'm going to add 2 more. Okay, so we'll call this one scowl. We'll call it scowl eyes, actually. Okay, and we'll call this one mouth. Okay, and then the idea with shape keys is just grab the one you want to mess with, go into edit mode, and move things around. Okay? The thing to understand is you are not doing any animating, and I'm doing this really sloppy right now just for demonstration purposes. I'm not being as careful as I was when I really did it. Okay? You are not adding any animation. That's a key thing to understand here. It doesn't matter what frame you're on. Nothing matters at all. When you jump out of edit mode, it's going to disappear. And you're going to go, what's going on? Okay, it is not intuitive. But let's keep going. So you basically, in edit mode, create the look that you're after that's kind of your destination, okay? All right, and so now let's do the same thing with his mouth. I grab the mouth shape key, and then I jump in here, and then I'm just going to kind of, let's say his face falls kind of thing, okay? Right? Boom, gone again. Seems a little confusing. Okay, so now here's how you actually use it. Number one, go to frame 0, go to the beginning of your animation, and then for each of these keys, just put your mouse over the value slider here and hit the I key. That inserts a keyframe. So what you're doing is you are keyframing the value or the amount of the influence of that shape key. So now if I go to this, so he says his line, and now I want him to scowl. So I'm going to grab the scowl, and I'm going to crank the value up. Boy, that's a crappy job. I did it much better the first time. Okay, let's say I'm going to go to full power. And so then I just hit the I key again. I hold my mouse over this, and I hit the I key. Okay, and now, of course, the scowl is happening very gradually over this whole period of time. If you want to tighten that up, just grab this key where everything was at 0 and just hit Shift D and duplicate it and move them close together. And then you get that effect. Okay, and you say, well, I want to do the mouth later, let's say. Or let's get really creative with the mouth. Let's go like this. Let's actually do it while he's talking just for fun to see what happens. So now I'm going to stretch his mouth down a little bit and hit the insert key. And now I'm going to crank it up even more. And I'm going to hit insert key. Okay, so now you get the two mixed together. And so what you can do is you can just add whatever you need to add. And frankly, one of the cool things about this is if you go ahead and subdivide the mesh enough, give enough resolution, if you find out that your drawing was a little unbalanced or something, just go ahead and set a shape key and fix it here, you know, as opposed to going back to Krita and maybe re-rendering everything, blah, blah, blah. So that's how you use shape keys. Let's see how that looks. I'm going to put it in only render mode and just see how things are looking here. So we hit the Alt-A for playback. And boy, that animation on his eyes is pretty bad. But you get the idea. So that's how you do it. And, you know, it's not as, everything's not as self-contained, let's say, as maybe, say, using the plastic tool in OpenTunes. But for me, it's working pretty well because it's totally procedural, for one thing. That means if I go back and change something in the Krita image sequences and re-render them, it all just propagates, you know, in Blender. So it's really easy to make fixes. And of course, it might even be worth mentioning that you could, not that you would, but you certainly could go in with the, well, let's go in with the grease pencil and add some shadows. Okay, so I'm actually going to go to front view. And let's say I want to add a little bit more shadow action, right? Okay, so I'm going to go back to the beginning here and say, this might backfire, but I'm going to try it. All right. Let's say we'll just add this. Hit the D key. Okay, it's actually about right. Okay, so as you can see, I'm just adding some stuff with the grease pencil right over top of my artwork. No big deal. And then you get all the benefits of that, you know, including the ability to change colors or whatever. And because now I need to change this so that this keyframe needs to happen at the right time. So basically it would happen, boom, here. So let's move that key back there. And so now, because all of the movement in the scene is done by the camera, the new shadows just move right along with them, and everything just kind of sort of works the way you would expect. So, yeah, it's a pretty flexible situation. Okay, how much time we got? Oh man, 42 minutes? Holy cow, this was supposed to be a short video. Well, hopefully you guys got some good tips out of it. There's between using the lights, I mean, if I turn these lights off, you'll see that in this case, or I'll just move the lights away, actually, get them out of there. Okay, so that's the actual color that came out of Krita. And if you're sitting there thinking, geez, Dave, I think that looks better, I agree with you. Probably the lights weren't really working great in this shot, but anyway, that's it for today. Just a couple tips, and as you guys know, of course, there will be more later.